in our, 450 in total, and based on the 26.5% enrollment we have, that's 119,000.
So this started out in one direction. It was originally established by the school committee as a committee with representation of each of the 3 towns,
Yes.
and explicitly nobody from the school.
Yeah.
Sometime after the first meeting,
Susan.
there was a decision to add Susan to that committee.
Susan Gibbons.
Mm-hmm.
Susan Gibbons. That was not made by the committee, that was made by, I guess, the school committee. They modified the charter. Susan came to a meeting with a request. They actually had to have $1 million from the towns to put into the stabilization fund. It didn't take 10 minutes for that to come down to $500,000. And now it's at the 450 number. And we did have a conversation, and I contributed to the extent that we need to have a better understanding of what you need it for, and you know how would we be able to take that back to our finance committees and share it in a manner that might get a positive reaction. And that's kind of how we left off at the meeting. There's since been an additional conversation, I know, that they are no longer looking to, somebody from the town, must have been from the board, selectmen, must have been Zillick, that wasn't me. I might have mentioned, but they changed a word, so it's no longer what was the word they used? Do you remember what it was?
They're not represented, yeah.
Or it's a recommendation
Right,
now,
yeah,
instead of a directional.
Yeah, yeah. That was, yeah.
Yeah, they changed a word in their charter. So now the committee's established to provide recommendations.
Feedback as opposed to direction.
Direction, yeah.
Can I ask, so how do they change the charter? Isn't the charter an act, or is it agreement?
No, this is more of it's a subcommittee working with the school committee.
In charge of the subcommittee.
So they go back
Yeah.
to the school committee, I assume.
Yeah.
So this has been, there's been a lot of motion going on what they're really trying to do, and the formality of it. For example, I didn't get any communication until today. I got the minutes from the last 2 meetings in January, and hope that we can show up for the meeting on Thursday. And Shay is going to be able to attend. I'm not able to attend minutes.
Gives us a whole lot of time.
Yeah.
But what they have done is backed away from asking for me, other than that.
They're
Or
not
as
asking for
currently,
any capital.
currently.
Gotcha.
They haven't completed their budget cycles, but their current iteration says that they're gonna push off by a year. They're asked for capital beyond this, just this maintenance accounting.
So there was a lot of discussion at the last meeting by me and other towns saying, we highly recommend you find a way to dovetail this to the roll-off of the existing bonds. And not, because what they're trying to do is to start this ahead of that. And that's what this $400,000, I think, dovetails into that.
So originally it was, because it was gonna be to help with this study,
Yeah.
right? Or the design and the study.
Right.
Now they're saying that this money is intended to be used exclusively and explicitly for repairs.
Okay, so
as
that's
they come
changed.
about. Yes.
Again, another thing that's
Things
changed.
yes.
So you'll hear what they have to say and we can have that conversation again. But I just, particularly from our perspective, my perspective, I don't speak for the town or the finance committee. To me, it's very important to see those bonds start to go down, and then if they want to ask for something to keep them flat or some other, something less than flat.
Down.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
I said that initially. I think it should come down, and they should consider maybe taking 80% and considering that should be their ask, and even 20% for the town or some other number, because we have other capital needs, and I have a lot in my head of things that I think we need, but I haven't shared that because we haven't had those conversations, so it's just personal opinions. But as you listen to them, there may be a strong argument that to keep it flat would be
Going down.
Because the dollars.
right, because those are the same dollars as they used to.
Inflation.
So it's at least worth the conversation and the consideration.
But you are going down because you're not adjusting for inflation.
Right. So, going in today, tomorrow, Thursday, both Dan and I have talked quite a bit about this, and our angst has always been, look, you're asking a person to speak as if they are a committee, which we are not, either one of us are not, nor are we the town.
Right.
And so that's been our major angst with this whole approach.
And that's what you need to be cautious of on Thursday, that they don't say, well, Dana said this, or
Yeah.
Dana said that. I made suggestions and I had a conversation, but I think I made it clear, as we have in the past, we don't specifically represent the town or the finance committee, because we have not spoken with our colleagues about, because they're all new topics.
Right.
They come up for discussion,
Yeah.
and we try to identify suggestions of how it might work, or how we might be able to go back and talk about it.
And that's precisely, yes, we're in agreement.
That's the right approach.
So what they are going to be discussing on Thursday, though, above and beyond this $450,000, is what their potential approaches are for 2020 and beyond, with not just the amount, but how they go at it. There are 3 set cohorts of work that they're looking at trying to do. One around roof and HVAC, one around electrical and some repositioning of the school, and another around modifying the school, things like exterior bathrooms, so that you don't have to open the place up.
For
Thanks.
sports
Sports
teams to
teams,
track
yeah.
mud inside.
During, yeah, or on a Saturday, if there's an event, you don't have to open up those, but there's a number of things like that. But they've been going back and forth on the different ways to come to the towns with this. Do I do it as, hey, I'm gonna ask for one design and then one build, or do I ask for a design for each of these phases and 3 separate construction requests?
So that's an interesting direction that they've moved to.
Yeah.
They started with this $30+ million capital, we absolutely needed, the school's falling apart, to, oh, let's throw some enhancements in there.
Yeah.
So it's,
Like outside.
we're already going down that slide of, we're getting away from the roof is leaking and we can't possibly live another year without fixing it, to, gee, let's add, and you know, I don't know that that's material or not, but.
But, well, I mean, there are some things, so I saw a picture, again, I'm taking a picture because I only saw it from
Yeah.
Zilli today, but I'll bring this back. I'm just sharing it because I'd like to hear anyone's feedback as I go into this blind and dumb, you know.
That's the best way to go.
Yeah, I know, but any feedback from us. But the first one was HVAC and roofing, which sounds to me like it's more aligned with that stuff. The next was the electrical systems, and then they did start talking about the healthcare center, space center, central office, conference space, and collaboration space, which is where we're starting to bleed into are some of these things nice to have, or not necessarily maintenance.
Are they gonna vote and come back in before the 25th?
No, so this is all for next year.
All for next year.
All, yeah,
They
so
put it off, they're not gonna try to get something on.
they're
the
getting
warrant article.
nothing, as of right now, no capital. Well, when you get right down to it, for Masco, we look pretty good this year. Remind, 2.3% net increase for us. No capital, other than the add to the stabilization. That's not capital, but add to the stabilization for repairs. That's the latest iteration that they have. But then they're gonna spend a lot of time talking about, well, for next year, we want this. Because what they're really doing is recognizing the previous comments that we've all made about the loan.
But the challenge with their stabilization fund is, we have a stabilization fund, Middleton has one, Boxford has one.
It's 2/3.
Masco's gonna have one.
Yeah.
When we go to use it, yeah, it's 2/3 vote at town meeting. When they go to use
said
it,
they
it's
were-
the school
they
committee.
were-
But they still need 2 towns out of 3.
They do, for that, they would need.
No, unanimous.
Yeah, so this would be a warrant article to each town, is the way they're trying to, it looks like they're trying to do this one.
And
Let
they
me-
also put money in their stabilization fund from E&D.
So that was the other thing, E&D, I asked about that today. E&D has about 1.3 something million dollars in it right now. Apparently that can't go above 5%, and this is all second, of their operating budget, which means basically 1.5 million, or their general fund budget, which means basically it can't go above 1.4, or close to 1.5 million. They are saying they want to keep that at that level, because when they do go for this next year,
Fixes their, helps their bond
it
position.
helps their bond position.
it's their reserves.
Yeah,
And the other thing that was challenging when I asked a couple of questions of what the balances of the different accounts were, don't know.
Mhm.
See,
Not sure.
When they say don't know, that means, I'm so
Well,
skeptical when I hear that.
Yeah, so we asked,
Yeah.
I think she was here one time, and we asked some questions similar to that, and we got the same answer.
yeah.
Don't have that, don't know that.
That's
So,
insane.
Yeah.
You should know they have in their accounts.
So basically, if they have turnbacks, it goes into their E&D, and they'll only move money out of E&D if they're gonna exceed the threshold.
Which they effectively are at the threshold now.
Yeah,
Uh,
At the limit.
Yeah, wait,
or near to.
near to it.
And then it falls to their stabilization funds, and then the school committee just votes to use it, and our control over that is just as voters when we elect people to the school
I
committee.
think their stabilization fund is somewhere around 600,000.
Yeah, and it's gone down, and this is where I'll get the numbers, I explicitly had asked for the numbers and the details of how it went down, but it had been over $1 million and it went down because of the repairs and things that they were doing, you know, I think what they're trying to say is that so we don't keep drawing that down, but I'll bring back more.
So their stabilization fund is not under our control, it's just a vote by the Masco School Committee to withdraw from it.
I believe so.
By all, is that how that works?
Yeah, once they get it, we don't control it.
Well, I imagine
So
that,
it's not a traditional stabilization fund.
not from our standpoint,
It's a regional
from their
school.
standpoint.
Yeah, I mean,
So that was the other interesting topic. They were looking for information from each of the towns in terms of our debt structure and looking forward. And they laid out the 3 towns. They neglected to
they,
put the line on for Masco, so I think
they have
that's something.
since added that,
they've
I
added
saw a
that.
copy, they added that, but they hadn't included our new debt.
Correct, correct.
So, we look like this, it's like,
Yeah.
no.
And so that's an interesting point, because when we're having the conversation, forgetting the gentleman's name from Middleton.
Dave, no,
Yeah,
Costa for-
Costas.
Costas, he's looking at that like it's the law, that, you know, you guys don't have any debt here. He said, well, it's missing a couple things.
Yeah.
And he said, oh, okay, so it was a very misleading chart that, with information that should be pretty well known. So hopefully that'll be available tomorrow or
Thursday.
Who's gonna generate that for?
I think they reached out to you previously.
They asked for our debt schedules
Okay.
that we had, and I didn't realize that was an existing document now, I think pretty much so. And we did let them know that we had the affordable bond at the time, but
Yeah, we can do that, so, we'll just either come back to you and ask for it, be updated, or,
yeah,
actually, we will.
did you send something to them?
we sent the debt schedules.
Send something and share with Trey and I?
Oh, yeah, they're actually online too. I
Oh,
mean,
they're on- okay.
Yeah, but I can send.
Do you have the updated ones with
We
the?
don't have the updated ones yet. We actually just got those last week, so,
Right.
I
but
was gonna ask for the
Yeah.
fiscal 20 budget, will
Yes.
there be an updated debt?
yes,
number?
there is, and,
So I got it,
Yeah.
put it in.
yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
I got it from Barbara.
I
So
mean,
you actually have it,
It's
okay.
excluded
Yeah.
debt,
Okay,
so
so you
the
just-
levy limit number
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
matter
So
so
then I
much.
can understand
Do you
why I
want,
changed
you want
that.
all of the schedules for 2000, I'll send them all, we're all together.
That's great.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I still have an estimate on the van. We need to do that.
And the thing that will help the tax rate in the end is the Donnybrook reimbursement, assuming people vote for it.
I can't imagine that. Voted on. That'd be a shocker.
One other question I had on revenues, cherry sheet receipts. Okay, I think there is, the fiscal 20 estimates are out, and I think we typically use either the 18 or, well, for 20 we should use the 19, because 19 cherry sheet receipts are real now, right?
Yes, yeah.
So we should use the 19 ones,
Okay.
which, if I looked at the state website, right, is
I
another
gave
40-ish
those
thousand in revenue.
To them too, I can send them to you again. I gave them to you in a hard copy, but I can send
Oh,
them to
you
you
did, okay,
now.
I'm sure that.
That's all right.
Thank you. Okay.
Because that will help us balance
Okay.
also.
Yeah,
And I think with all of those, assuming the health insurance does what you think it will, And what what it sounds like they'll approve snow and ice,
Then we still have a lot of.
even without the rec.
Yeah,
We're within shouting distance of being able to use our traditional 1% of free cash to reduce the tax levy.
Where you're probably still within a couple $100,000.
Yeah.
What do we put into OPEB though?
300,000.
We did put 3.9.
well, you can rate that.
No.
Okay.
No, well, that's free,
No.
that's free cash
That's
anyhow.
Yeah, yeah.
That's free cash.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll end up getting to the point where we need to see how much is left in free cash, because after we get to our traditional balance, and then talk about, okay, well, if we're higher up the mountain, do we wanna offset that? Try to mitigate the pain of that. Of course, with 400,000 Donnie Whistle, yeah, ooh.
400,000 on the citizens petition.
Yeah, well, we're gonna go to bond, it's gonna be a lot cheaper than was really anticipated, because our rating's much higher.
It will help,
Yeah, that means, okay.
0.25% or something,
Yeah, so that's good there.
something to sneeze at.
No,
Then it's just the gamble of what will the rates be in fall.
Right.
I'm not raising interest rates.
We had 125
I don't know
basis
about
point, we got 125 basis point increase this year, that's it.
No, 0.
One.
Okay, so basically next week, we ought to try to vote as much as we can. And if you can put all these things in the model, Mike, then we'll know
Okay, so I'll
where
get-
we're coming out.
All right, so that was just over, the Cherry Street from Catherine, health insurance and the
I think you're
Masco.
probably right, I guess it's from like 200 grand probably.
Yeah.
Probably goes down.
And Lou will check on snow and ice. And
Right.
Kelly maybe will have good news on the rec. And you and Catherine will beat each other up over local receipts and.
So
No, I
snow
go,
and
I
ice,
always go.
That's assuming no
88,000.
guidelines are approved.
Yeah.
right, yeah,
So
without
let's make that
including
clear,
today's
right?
storm.
Yeah.
Not including equipment.
Not including today's storm.
Yeah.
So the balance in that account is roughly 88,000, including the warrants that are in process and the payroll that's in process, but doesn't include anything with today's storm.
What is the storm?
Well, this was kind of a doozy, so I don't know,
Yeah.
in terms of salting.
But some of it was plowing during regular work hours, but there's still contractors and materials.
Yeah, yeah. So, but the current balance would be 88,000.
And if we have turnbacks, so much the better,
Right.
because then we don't have to carry it against the fiscal 20 taxes.
Well, there's also rumors of storms coming up this weekend too.
I heard rain.
Hush,
It's
hush now.
March, it'll melt.
Yeah.
Blasphemer!
Yeah, so you get within a couple $100,000, that's assuming you
Then-
don't approve any over guidelines, and you got over guidelines to debate.
Right.
To the
Yeah.
scale.
Oh, yeah, no. We could just say no to everything, we could keep some on their merits, you know.
We got 2 meetings at the end of that.
Yes, we do. Well, with the 25th as an emergency, or something in between if
Well, we're
we
gonna need
absolutely
it.
have to.
The reality is, Masco isn't gonna get our half a thousand. Their last meeting was, or 7th, and so we might get some of their stuff next week.
Masco.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah,
elementary
that looks-
school committees. I'll make a note to ask John to check with the elementaries that, okay, yeah. We need to know.
Wouldn't the elementary school be the highest priority because of the fact that it's tied in with Article 3rd and any potential ballot vote if they are proposing?
Yeah, it doesn't sound like.
Whereas Masco is at least in its own warrant article, you could
Right.
always sort of say recommended,
Anything.
not that you want to,
Well-
but
And
if push
so
came to
far,
shove,
It
you don't
doesn't
have to
sound
feel
like-
backed into a
It
corner.
And
does-
we're not looking like there's gonna be an override there as opposed to
Masco.
the elementary
So far.
schools, where
Unless-
they've been telegraphing
Sharpening
that
their
they're not doing an
pencils.
override, so.
Is Masco done considering the bus time change
for this year.
for this year.
It seems sort of lost its luster or something. Work had a passion for it.
Yeah, you can't share the buses. It's an added expense because you can't share the
Money
buses.
everywhere.
Right. Can't do that.
Sure you can, you just put the little kids to school at 5:30.
Right.
What the heck, they're up anytime.
Mine was.
Yeah, the problem is they come home unattended.
Yeah.
Because your high school
Yeah, latchkey
babysitters
kids.
go to school.
Yeah.
Just so the Masco kids can get a few extra winks in it.
Well, I see them sleeping on the school bus driving past my house in the morning. They're out cold at 7:15, heads against the window.
Or the high school, oh, yeah, okay.
Because they're up all night playing Xbox.
No, my daughter who was up at 5:30 in the morning, every morning, no matter what time she went to bed, now, so it's 12 hours a day.
God bless her.
And 12 hours a day.
If only I could.
Mhm.
Okay, so everybody will look at the vote tracker, check their department budgets, so that we can approve department budgets next week. Mike's gonna,
Base budgets.
base budgets, and we can be talking about the older guidelines. So,
I don't know what
I-
it
I
was.
think-
Brush up on whatever anybody wants.
Can we put the police, I don't know that we bring the police in, but I think we need to talk a lot about their proposals. There are 3 options
Yeah.
next week, so that there is an opportunity to react.
mhm.
You know, I mean,
Sure.
I think I know where I'm going to land as a recommendation to the group. But I think we need to be able to, you know, with all the work that they put in, the real,
Yeah.
whatever we do, we need to give them the opportunity to come back to us with, if we come out with anything that we've spoken,
Yeah.
that we can't answer, and let them have a chance to respond.
Now, when they were here, they were saying, look, we think we could actually reduce overtime in our budget and add a person.
Yes.
But we're not sure we want to do that because we're worried.
So they,
Are they more confident now?
so they have 3, if you remember, there were 3 options. There was, same with what you have, there was add 1 and add 2.
Right.
4 o'clock.
The add 2, they're still at the place that they would like, they're not sufficiently confident that they can say, yeah, it's gonna be 0. But they're very inclined to ask, okay, if you went with 2,
Mhm.
0 our budget out, let's put that extra money into a FinCom reserve, you know, account in case we have to come back and report out that we have to, we're not making what we assumed we could make. So that's a discussion we would all need to have.
I mean, since our reserve fund transfer philosophy is you didn't anticipate this.
Yeah, understand, but
It
what,
is a little.
so to give them, I agree with you, the idea behind it though is that if there's another mechanism to do it, hold them accountable to get to 0, but if they can't, they have to stand up and acknowledge they couldn't, and we have that safety net sitting somewhere where it's not just in their budget. You know, they believe they can do it, but they're not so confident that they want to risk the town's finances, is what, maybe how you think
And
of
the
it.
same applies to adding 1.
So if you add 1, they're less comfortable, so it's a smaller amount of money
Yeah.
that it costs us, you know. So it's $45,000 or $50,000 was what they felt they needed to put in if it was 1.
Mhm.
It was $65,000 if it was 2. Okay? So it's a small amount of money, but it's a larger percentage of the per individual's expense that they're saying they don't think they're not as certain that they can cover.
Except the chief's going to retire
So the,
partway
what,
through
Part
the
of the
fiscal year.
succession
So-
planning is.
so the going to 1, the sole advantage, as I see it, and we'll talk about this next week, it really is that there's the double if thing. The first if is if it's not successful. And secondly, if Captain Hayward was selected to be chief,
Mhm.
then you have a fallback of, okay, you've already hired your replacement. And we're back to where we were, without having to sever anyone, without having to change anything, and you have the advantage of you've already trained someone up and there's no lost time.
But that makes presupposition.
Yes,
Yes.
one supposition, which is, you know, and if Captain Hayward wasn't selected to replace, then you're at a place that you're one over what we'd be saying, okay, revert back to your old staffing, and we now have one person more. If there's no turnover, we have one person more than our staffing would allow. And that, you know, the advantage there is you're not swinging for the fence, you're swinging for a single, is what it really is, and singles are safe, or safer, would be
Get
my
on
analogy.
base.
Yeah, yeah, so that's what when we talk Monday, but I'd like you to put that on the agenda Monday so we can,
Well, I think it will naturally be in there,
Yeah.
department budget review and approval, let's just make sure to bring it up,
Yeah.
and
Just a note, the chief is out on a medical leave for right now. I don't know if he'll be back by Monday, so you might
I
want to.
have what I need,
Okay.
I've gotten what I need, so appreciate that, but this would be more, it's just, I wanted to be able to have, if we walked out of that meeting.
That's fine, I just want to make sure
Yeah.
you're aware that
If, you know,
you
I
can't
appreciate that.
personally be
Be
here
here, yeah.
perhaps next Monday.
No, I wanted,
Well-
more, it was,
it's more for the week after.
right, and or, you know, or questions or answers, just, if we do it next week, then if I can't answer anything, I have the ability to go get the answer.
Okay. So next week, it's the elementary schools at 7:15, and trying to get through budgets, and looking at a updated model that's got our best information. It's hopefully got health insurance, and maybe not the rec, and
So, Karen, I want to bring up one thing. I brought it up last week tentatively.
Yeah.
But I think I want to bring it up one more time, a little more vociferously. The non-union wages are sort of averaging 5.6%. I said before, I think they're high. But I hear like numbers, we have 40,000 here, 40,000 there, we could do this, that, or the other. I mean, if we scale those back, if the town scaled those back to something else, you'd have your money for the extra police officer, you'd have your money for something or the other. I mean, there's a lot tied up in it, but it seems like a large raise. And I know we talked about it last week, and there was a lot sort of, maybe, but I guess I'd like to sort of hear strongly, is it something we should ask the selectmen to consider, is it something we should, okay, kill it, don't do anything about it? But, I mean, that number comes across, and I don't hear anyone challenging it as strongly as I think they should.
To me, it's about all the wages, not just the non-union, because I don't think it's fair to have the union employees get one thing and the non-union employees get another. Now, whether or not,
So what's that comparison?
whether or not everything can be discussed, that might be a question. I don't know. I personally don't like focusing just on the non-union employees.
So- Okay, so I don't, but, okay, but everybody looks at everybody else and they're trying to justify this. And if we can break this cycle somewhere.
I
Yeah.
suspect the
And-
25 non-union employees is not the lever to break the cycle.
Well,
Because-
I'm just, okay, this is just
Yeah.
a discussion.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I don't think we're gonna lose, I don't think in the world of attract, retain, and motivate, it's gonna change
So I,
performance of the town. And
Some of the increase is just because of where pay periods fall, right? Because people who are topped out
sure, Karen's
would
got-
be on 2%, and instead they're at 2.75%.
So I'm
So
not-
that's a
yeah,
piece of it, but the rest of
Yeah.
it, we
I'm
know
not used
about,
to a
it's the
public
steps.
organization, but in a private organization, you know, your high performer are getting 5.5% raises.
I wish.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
And you've got
Not a
some-
top performer.
And you've got some
I got 1%
differentiation.
this year.
Right. Well, I'm
This
just,
year, no,
okay.
you-
I mean,
Yeah.
if I'm not voted, if I'm not, you know,
No,
if
no,
I'm voted, I'm not
it's-
voted, but
It's
I-
something that
but
I
I do
think we've
think,
all.
I'm
wrestled
saying it, a
with.
lot of people are thinking it
Yeah.
in the voting public.
So I shared last week,
Yeah.
I'd done, and it was only, again, I haven't done it yet for the schools. But I went in and pulled salary and wages, just the salary and wage category for the year over year since 2012, 2013, since 2013. And it's been a 3.9% CAGR annual. So on average, salary and wages have gone up essentially 4% per year. We've
Is
gone
that-
up,
Since when?
that's just the salary and wages since
For
20.
everything. That's not just the non-union.
That's union.
No, that is for non-schools, everything non-schools.
So there are
Union
union
in there as
pieces
well.
in there
Yes.
as well.
But ultimately, they've gone up 3.91% CAGR year over year. That's $1,132,000.
Twice the rate of inflation, it's.
If you had done it just 2.5%, which is, you know, I'm not saying we should, but I'm just trying to point it out to equate it to Prop 2.5. If we'd done what Prop 2.5, staying within Prop 2.5, it's $440,000 less.
Per year.
Over the course.
Of how many
So,
years?
since 2012, since 2013, our 30% increase in,
6 years.
So 55,000 a year, basically.
yeah. So it's, you know, instead of being up of 1.1 million on what is now a $4.8 million spend, it would have been up, you know, $440,000. I don't know what the right place is.
That's more than that, that's, now you're saying almost
No,
600,
he's
600.
saying- He's saying the difference.
No, what I'm saying, if I did a 1.25 year over year,
Oh, so like compounding.
if it went up at 2.5% year over year, would be at $4.4 million. At 3.9%, we're at 4.8 million. So it's over $400,000 more on our budget line items.
Total,
It
over the
is.
course of 6 years.
No, the net. So this year, because of, right now, we'd be at 4.3 million in salary and wages if
Right.
we'd been at 2.5,
Exactly.
instead of being at 4.8.
So in a vacuum,
Compounded over 6
Yeah.
years.
I'm not comfortable with the numbers moving up. I think Mike's got a point there.
Yeah.
I don't think we can look at it in a vacuum. You can't compare private to public sector. There's a lot of things in the private sector, average salaries are higher, bonuses are included, there's a whole bunch of things that go on. The other thing is, you need to look at all the other municipalities,
Yeah.
what's happening in the industry. So are we an outlier in the industry with those kinds of numbers? My guess is we're not, I don't know. So it's, yeah, you know, I think it's a good point of conversation, and I understand the reaction to it, but I think we need to be really cautious. And the other thing is, unions do drive, you look at the teacher salaries, and you know, they've grown significantly, but the average teacher salary, you know, are they underpaid? You know, I don't know what the average teacher salary is. 70?
Over.
Okay, so 70.
Yeah, for, yeah.
Okay, so is that a good average salary for somebody that spends 30 years of their life?
With a
teaching
master's degree.
Master's
yeah.
degree and go with that?
Understood. Agreed. And that's part of the conversation that has to happen, but,
Yeah.
and I agree, and I kind of tend to agree with you guys that I don't think it's fair to look at individually just the non-union. I think we need to look at this, but I think we need to be
The natural-
incredibly aggressive.
The
at
natural
this.
tendency is to look at it because you can actually
Make an
impact
effect,
and
yeah.
pull that lever without having the unions on your back, but that's not fair.
Right.
But you also could end up with another union. on
That's
your
right.
back.
Right,
I don't wanna, I
That's
don't
a-
wanna,
yeah, that's an
I don't
absolute,
wanna
yeah.
scaremonger.
No, that's an absolute valid
But these races are higher than the, or are the town halls, not the town hall, are the non-union right now higher or lower than the union races?
So
The
it-
teachers, if you look at,
The individual.
particular teachers,
Yeah, let's say if you took their salary, but here and there.
I suspect the teachers, the compounding of steps and levels plus the cost of living
Step and track.
is more.
Okay, so I'd like to have that data to know.
Yeah,
for
that,
sure.
well,
I'd like to have that
that's the
data.
next one I wanted to focus.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try and do this.
Kelly, do you have the elementary grid?
I have a
I
copy.
I can
of
find it, I just,
Yeah.
you know, I think this is a great conversation to have. In fact, if I thought that we wanted to have this conversation more thoroughly at this point in the process, I would be putting some money on the table so we can get a consultant.
Yeah, well, it kind of
Right. But to bring this up at this point in the process, I think is a little disingenuous to the hardworking non-union employees who just got your AAA bond rating.
Well, I'll disagree with that, because I say
That's okay.
we've raised this repeatedly.
So then give me
Throughout this year and
$20,000
last
and
year.
I'll get a study, and then we'll start to unravel all of the progress
We
you've
just
made over
did
the past
that
5
2
years.
years ago, right? We just had a
5
study.
years ago. Let's do it again
I
then.
thought
Give
it
me
was-
20
I thought
grand
it
and I'll
was
do
sooner
it.
than that. We just did.
You've been around too long, Eric.
I'll do it. I'm happy to do it. I
Well,
just
I
can't
think-
start tweaking with it 2 weeks before the
So
war
I
was
think before
different.
we do that, before we even consider a study, I think we need to get the details of the numbers. And I mean, what I did is not a study, and I'm not a professional at this, but it's getting that base level of
I
detail.
would much rather give you the information you need than to have our non-union employees go to the Ask Me rep and ask why we don't have a union.
Well,
Yeah.
if you
I think
know,
it does this group a discredit to be bringing that up at this point, to be honest, with all due
So-
respect.
Well,
It comes up every year, and it's very frustrating because the hardest people, the hardest working people in this building, who got this building built, aren't in a union, and they haven't gone running asking for representation, but they should have, after some of the things I've heard at this table. It's
And that-
very
so add in,
disturbing to me.
add in the other groups, add in these educate the schools, and let's get those numbers and do that evaluation.
I don't have the resources to do it
No,
at this point in
I-
time.
No, the schools have a grid that's,
They have a grid, I'll be happy to get it to you.
Yeah.
I don't want
So
all
is there-
our non-union
yeah,
people to
no,
feel
I
like
don't
the
think-
sacrificial
No,
This is
lambs.
not, this is not
Dude,
personal.
so I think there's a
Comments.
general consensus here that
It
we all
comes
say,
up every year,
This
and
isn't
my
an attack.
employees come to me and they say, we are busting our behinds, and we don't get any overtime, we don't get to work details, and yet, here they are, trying to take away
And so
our
the-
2.75%.
while-
I'm speaking on their behalf, it's very frustrating to hear
well,
this.
let me just say, while we're saying that, the general consensus group was a conversation, and I'm disappointed that it's frustrating, because it's part of what our role and responsibility is to
I
have that.
understand.
But the general consensus here was, as we had this conversation, was it's not fair to do, the same thing as you, it's not fair to do something only to the non-union. I think that's what, as a group,
Thank you.
we're leaning towards. But we need these numbers, and we've been talking about this, and it's been very hard to get these numbers. And it's
They're all
something
online.
it's something that we
You
need
have
to
them
be
in
able
your
to pull.
packet.
And easier,
It's-
and the easier
not
one
hard.
to get was the town ones. Getting the school ones is, for me, is more difficult right now.
well.
And understand, so I started with the one I had.
Right.
If that had shown a 2%, then I say, okay, we don't have anything here, and I would have stopped. It showed something, so we need to pull the other numbers.
Nobody's saying,
I'm
nobody's looking to
happy,
make
I'm
any
happy to do
decisions.
that, but now isn't the time.
I think it's just a matter of transparency and being able to make sure that everyone is educated and has an understanding as to that process and how it's working, so that we can respond and react and answer the questions to town floor when it comes up.
I appreciate that, and in the efforts of transparency, our employees have had our salaries, our sick leave days, our vacation days, our personal days put on public websites and shared with the world for no other reason than because we have a lower threshold of personal privacy, and I get that, we all get that. But why does it always come back to, 2.75? It's just very, I can tell you, I'm talking on behalf of your non-union
That's the
employees.
step.
Okay.
It is very,
Yeah.
it's just very frustrating for them.
Yes.
And to be,
We're not
if you
talking
want to do the
2.75.
numbers,
Yeah.
tell me, give me the money. That's the problem I have, is that everybody wants to dismantle what was voted by the Board of Selectmen 5 years ago, but nobody wants to give me the money to look at it again. I want to look at it
Frustrating
again.
part is we have a budget problem when we're struggling with balancing this thing every.
But it's not
That's the
because of your
part.
non-union employees.
We didn't
It's
say
because-
that.
but-
That's what you imply when you bring
Nobody's-
that up.
nobody's
No,
saying
no,
that.
and I gotta say right now, I feel like you're using this to avoid this topic right now.
No, give me 20 grand and I will do it.
So, Kelly,
Okay.
last year we gave the police a lot of gas over their 5% increase. And they came back with a plan to deal with it. I mean,
But,
yeah, I understand they have different levers to
So-
pull, but
Yeah.
we gave them, we give
I-
everybody gas for this
I have a
stuff.
plan to deal with it too. If you want to
Yeah.
close town hall on Fridays, we can save 4 hours from every non-union employee. There you go. There's your money.
So,
So I'm sorry this conversation's gone the way it has, Kelly, because I don't think there's a need for this at all.
Yeah.
I think if you look at the taxpayers in the town of Topsfield, and they're looking at their 2.5, maybe 3% raises on an annual
I've got
basis.
2%. I know exactly.
Okay, so they're looking at that, and then they're paying tax dollars that are paying union and non-union people north of 5%.
Yeah,
There's a disconnect there.
you're right.
I tried to make some comments that explain it's apples and oranges. It does not satisfy the person that's out there, working their 40, 50 hours a week or whatever it is, 60 hours a week, and can't get a raise over 2%.
And I
They
understand
don't
that.
appreciate and understand this,
Or
so
the guys on fixed
I
income.
think that's a responsibility that we have to discuss it and figure it out
Yeah.
without getting into,
Agreed.
we're attacking your people. We are not attacking your people. We're having a conversation,
That's
trying to figure out how to respond to this question. Because
And-
one of our colleagues has asked it a couple times. I think it's fair to give him some comfort in that and see how the rest of us feel, so.
And I think you can't just willy-nilly pick one segment
Right.
and say,
We agree
okay.
on that.
Yeah.
We all agree on that.
And so it's a bigger
Yeah.
picture question for those who negotiate increases and for
Right.
those who negotiate. I don't see negotiating away a union step and level grid for teachers.
Mhm.
That
No.
is so
Not gonna
ingrained.
happen. Right.
Yeah.
And I think, a place like Boston, they've got so many teachers,
Right.
and they can hold their salaries level, because
Oh,
they-
they have commercial development and.
well,
yeah,
no,
that good
no,
stuff.
but beyond that, they can hold their total salary level because they are confident they're gonna have retirees falling off the top,
Right.
and they're gonna bring in the young ones low.
Okay.
Right.
And the retirees pay for everybody else to get steps and levels.
Mhm.
Even our
Right.
schools don't have that, because people stay. And it's even more of a problem when you're talking the small numbers
Right.
in the non-union positions in town,
Well, and-
because people stay. And that's a good thing,
Right.
because
Well, and that-
you have experience.
That's right.
Added to that, and I had this great conversation with my family, who are all teachers, this last night about it. And it was on this same topic, and the conversation is people also stay because the inherent nature of the stepping grid has caused them, if they leave, they can't get a job somewhere else because
Just
they would be
start over.
too high up the
Right.
grid,
Yeah.
or
Right,
to be hired, or they would have to start so low on the grid.
right.
So
It's
it's
not a good thing or a bad thing.
it's a dynamic that has to be considered. Yeah, there's a good side to it and a bad side to it as a school. There's a good side as a teacher and a bad side, but it has to be recognized and
Right.
considered. There isn't,
Right.
but
And frankly, the raises we've seen, we didn't used to have this large an increase because we had an ancient non-union
Right.
grid and everybody was topped out. Then we
Right.
got a new grid that better positions us
That's right.
with other municipalities that was a result of a study. And in the new grid, people had some mobility,
So-
which
but
we're paying for.
that leads to a good point, which would be helpful,
Mhm.
if I to be able to share it, is if we are everyone is shifting towards the top of the grid now, then that means there's an inherent point we're coming up against where these
Yeah.
types of raises will stop.
Yes,
Right.
So having that information is something that then is helpful in the conversation about, yeah, they've been doing that.
Right.
yeah.
Right.
If you look at when Catherine gives us the detailed omnibus budget, you can see comments
Yes,
for some of the
Right.
people.
so some of,
And
yes,
Right.
inspection
Everybody.
services are all
Yeah.
at step away.
Everybody.
yeah.
And that's how I said, oh, okay, well,
Right.
it was 2% on the grid, but this is how the pay periods
Yeah.
fall, so it's
So
a
that might
bigger
be the
percentage.
analysis, is what does it look like over, a 20-year career in terms of what's that average rate? Because
Right.
it changes
Yeah,
that.
they can
Right.
forecast.
When they get their level of competence up to the highest level after
Right.
that 10, 11
Right.
steps,
Right.
then they're kind of
And
frozen
you don't
in that.
necessarily hire people at step one,
Right.
and
That's-
you'd like to,
Well, we've been able to though.
yeah.
You know, it takes a lot of experience and education to get past 1, 2, or 3. I'm very, very
Say that
aware
again.
of the need to do that.
It takes experience, it's not based on time.
Not necessarily, there's a combination of experience,
hire.
degree when you hire. I
When
don't
you're hired-
automatically
But once
put
you're hired,
people-
it's automatic.
Near automatic, it's not automatic.
If you do the performance review. One of the things you're seeing though is that not everybody is maxed out at the top. We've had people who are at step 13 say, but wait a minute, I've got a PhD, I should be making more money. And I've had to say, well, that might be true, but not in this job and not in this town,
That's true,
and,
that's true.
right?
But how
So-
many, what percentage of your folks don't get a step increase on an annual basis?
Right now, there aren't that many, but that gets to,
Because of reasons other than they're at the top.
because
For
we've,
performance, what percentage don't get that? step.
Well, we want people to get a step because it means they're
That doesn't
performing.
answer my question.
Maybe whoever's tapped out, whoever's
Right,
topped out.
besides them,
So it's
what
not,
percentage
So far
fail to
you
perform
haven't
sufficiently to
had
get the step?
Last year we had 2 people out of all of them, whatever that percentage that is.
Okay.
Yes, and we have maybe at least we have at least 4 or 5 people that are maxed out.
So it's
That
virtually
will
automatic.
increase. If they're performing, they get a raise. You
Right.
want people to perform. That shouldn't be a bad thing.
I understand that.
so, it would be interesting to see that distribution, and I mean, and that can help us with whether this
So-
is where we are in this cycle.
So
You
the question
forecasted
I
it out
have-
over 5 years, and you said, all right, we've been hitting this
Yeah.
CAGR, but it's expected to level off.
Off, right.
Right.
It's a slightly different conversation.
It's a
I
very,
would
very
like to
different
continue to do this, but all I'm saying is that to talk about it without putting some resources behind it is it's seen or considered, because it seems like it happens all the time, and mostly because our employees feel like the closer we get to town meeting, the more vicious
The more
people seem to be. And it's hard for them not to take that personally, especially when they're working so hard without overtime, right?
I think
The
that-
other thing to consider that helps to stop people in their tracks is to remind people that all of the savings we have from health insurance is because our people voluntarily stepped up and they said, you're right, we're paying 1/3 of this, and so is the town. And they came to the table voluntarily. And so I don't want to lose fact of that, because that's one of the most rapidly growing expenses in every industry, in every town. And we have made substantial progress in keeping that mitigated. And particularly this year, in prior years when we've level funded health insurance, it's been because our employees, union and non-union, have stepped up to the plate and said, we acknowledge that this is an issue and we want to be a part of the solution. That's how I stop people from saying, please stop nickeling and diming the people who could go and join a union tomorrow and they
There are
don't.
some that are vicious, and there's always gonna be some that are vicious, but the majority are not, and we assume positive intent for everybody.
Thank
Most
you.
people are reasonable enough where if you give them the transparency,
Right.
we'll get it.
Right. So I thank you for noting that.
And it's really a big picture question for all negotiations.
Yeah.
And, if we want to think of a different way to do it, like Kelly said, well, it needs more than the people in this room.
Right.
Because
It's a policy discussion.
No, I sense we
But
might have
it's
been
gotta
stepping on the
start-
board of
it's gotta start
selectmen
somewhere.
on this,
It's
I'm aware of
somewhere.
that, but.
Yeah,
So the conversation and the details have to start.
and it's something maybe to talk about when the school committee's here.
Yes.
Because they're negotiating the biggest dollar amount
Yes,
of
absolutely.
salaries.
Sure.
And even more so than, if you add up the police and fire.
Absolutely. That's what's
So
moving the needle.
there are 4 groups that get to decide this. We're not any one of the 4.
I agree.
It's the school committee, the board of selectmen. Right, and there are 2 in the board, the unions and the non-union.
Right.
But there are 4 different constituents, and even within that, I know there are a couple of different unions, but there are 4 different constituents. The only thing we can do is get data, present data, and get out of the way.
Yeah.
People wanna try to influence the
Right, but
outcome,
make it
you can try to
loud.
influence the outcome.
Those are the big ones, other elected officials, don't they also make decisions for water commissioners or for park and cemetery commissioners?
Right.
But
I don't know.
But do park do salaries, or?
No, they go off the same grid.
the negotiations
No,
with the park
the
and
grid
cemetery.
overrides basically.
So
If you're
not-
not, if you're not in a union, the personnel rules and regs in the grid.
But the
dictate
union park and
compensation.
cemetery people, the selectmen negotiate the union for park and
Yes.
cemetery, don't they?
Yes.
But
Yeah.
Kelly, is there like an opportunity to combine, could you combine highways and parks? Because they're both sort of
We sort
equipment and
of,
trucks and,
well,
when the highway guys maybe aren't so busy on something, can they
Well,
help
that's-
on the
There's a
parks?
study going on.
that's what
Yeah.
they're studying.
Okay. Oh, okay.
There you go.
Not for this town meeting most likely, but
Okay.
yeah, so,
I mean, because that's the other option.
But to that
Consolidate
point
some
though, our
stuff.
last negotiations,
Mhm.
just so you understand, the last negotiations, knowing what we're all talking about here,
Mhm.
is exactly why we got all of the 3 ASME groups to come together as the Public Works ASME
Mhm.
group.
Okay, no, I understand.
But to your earlier points, one of the things that I had to convey to them was that having 3 separate groups on their own and not allowing us to integrate biweekly pay was causing us a problem on on our level. And we were able to integrate biweekly pay, and we did that, and that's going to hopefully give us some, efficiencies that we haven't had in the past. But being able to work with them to do that was very, and they're in unions, but it was very helpful, and now everyone, including non-union, are going on biweekly pay. And so hopefully that's another indication of everyone's willingness to, to step up and to say, we understand what you're going through, we are part of this town, even though we don't vote, we don't pay taxes. But when people work here, this is their town as well. So that's really where that more visceral response came from, is they want to feel like they are part of the solution, and I think that they are.
Yeah. And the town benefits by having people who stay and
aren't gonna have a revolving door and have to retrain people, right?
I mean, I think the town has supported the town hall. I mean, we're sitting in a building that's kind of a tribute to.
Well, the other part though is that we're not just randomly handing out step raises. I mean, there's a system that was voted 5 years ago.
Okay.
It was voted, there's a system just like there's a union. And so what I'm suggesting is that I hear you, and I want to avoid having this conversation every year, 2 weeks before the warrant has to be printed. And the reason why I say that though, it's because the conversation needs to start long before now, but it also needs all of you to be able to say, when I come to you next year and say, I would like $20,000 so we can have a consultant look at this, that you don't think I'm just trying to look for 20 grand just because I have nothing else to spend 20 grand on for the town.
And I'll take the blame on the timing.
Well, what's the frequency?
There's nothing to blame. We've been having this conversation and ramping it up since last year.
So what's the frequency that you normally would do studies, like in my world,
I would be asking you now to set aside
$20,000
$20,000 in
No.
free cash to do it.
How frequently?
The cycle, like
I would say
every 5
every
years?
5 years, and it's been 5 years, so this would be the time.
Right.
I didn't put it on the schedule because I knew we had other capital projects.
Sure.
But quite honestly, if you really are serious about this and you want to do that,
Well, I mean,
by all means, now is your chance,
I think it would
because
be good to get a study from a dove and a hawk and see what the two comparisons are.
I would agree, let's do it. Let's do it.
Well,
I need some funding to help make it happen, that's all I'm saying.
yeah.
I can't do it in a vacuum, it wouldn't be fair of anybody, because I don't want to be seen as the partial one who's just protecting the non-union employees. That's not what I am. I mean, I got a 2% last year. I mean, if anybody should be upset about somebody getting 4.75, it would be me, right? That's not what this is about. This is about you knowing and me being honest with you, saying that when this comes up, if we're not going to put any, resources behind it, why even bring it up? I'm willing to do it and to do the homework and to make it happen, and now would be the time. So if you're serious and you want to make a vote at the next meeting to allocate $20,000 for free cash,
It's always gonna come
I'm
up.
always supportive
It's
of
always
it.
gonna come up. Headcount's the biggest expense across the entire budget, so it's not a tough conversation.
I'd rather get the study done and address it than to keep having it come up with no ability to do anything about it. I would be fully in support of it. If you want me to draft the request, I will do that.
So you're saying the policy, you have no knobs to turn on that? The
No,
4.75?
we voted a plan, it's a scale, it's a
That's
grid.
what the-
It used to be
Well,
my,
no,
And
you
it's so the
can,
POS
you determine, you and the Board of Selectmen determine the COLA each year though. There's a step in a grid,
Yes.
but the movement
Yes.
of the grid, you have
It's
total
a
control
COLA,
over
right.
that.
and when every other union's getting 2%, I'm not, right?
I'm not disputing what's
Right.
right or wrong, I'm just trying to be clear
That-
that there
yes.
is the right to address
There are
that.
two
There
pieces
is.
to it. There's a step and there's an
Yes.
adjustment to the grid as a whole,
Right,
because it's a grid.
Which is pretty common.
and that 2% is intended to keep up with the market, so that we don't price ourselves out of the market and get back into the same position we were in before we called for the last
I
study.
think we only have like 1 or 2 years where our grid didn't move.
This is the first year I moved in, last year was the first year I moved in 4 or 5 years.
Was it?
Wow.
Oh, yeah, no.
Our grid, our range,
So range.
the ranges, not raises.
Right,
But if you were,
Right.
and ours,
See the hay system penetration and.
ours is a little, it's a little different in that if you're at 120% of the midpoint, you have to walk on water to get 1%.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
Well, there's definitely things we can change,
you're
we
gonna
can
walk
tweak.
on water just to get
And
1%.
it's designed so, because
Because the feeling is,
you're not getting turnover there, where you.
right,
If they start getting
well, the
turnover, then
feeling
you
is
start
this
worrying
job
about
is worth this amount of
it.
money.
Right. Mhm.
Well, I definitely have some ideas on how we can tweak the current scale. Just to give you some comparison, 5 years ago, our grid actually had a range of 3 to 7% raises. So you think that 2.75 is,
But it's not
Uncalled
2.75,
for?
it's not
Fine.
for a
2.75.
step, one step is worth 2.75.
I understand the step, but I mean,
It's
it's,
the
what we're seeing here is,
aggregate
what we're
impact.
seeing is a 3.91,
Yeah.
just
Okay.
in this one,
But
annualized.
that's a combination of the cost
Combination.
of living
And,
and the step, and depending on what year you started, it might be before we had the new grid, and the new grid
Yes.
was a definite.
Right,
so it was actually
Shift.
2 years before, it looks like before the new grid, because it also showed the next year, the first year, there was a drop. So in that is, salary and wages actually went down in 2013,
And that could be
Yes.
turnover.
or
and
turnover or
personnel.
something.
yeah.
But the overall for salary and wages went down, but, you know, across the board, there's just, you know, our budgets are going up and 80+% of the budget is people.
Mhm.
And so we need to look at this across the entire, and it's, I will acknowledge and completely agree, it is not non-union. It is all four of those
Mhm.
constituents. We need to look at.
The non-union is the smallest.
Mhm.
Most vulnerable. It is, I mean, and that's why I sound so protective. I'm just, I don't want them to have the impression that, this committee is constantly bringing it up. It's your responsibility to ask the question, and I want to help be a part of that.
We have to look, our responsibility is to look at everything, not just.
Right,
one.
I agree, and I'm willing to help you do that, because I want people to know that we pay people here fairly for doing a very good job, and if they're not doing a good job, they're not gonna be on that paper, because they're not gonna be working here. Our hope is that we are able to give people a step increase because they're performing. There are ways we can tweak the existing grid, but I can't do that alone. I need a professional and a consulting group to help me do that. I have many ideas, but I am reluctant to start tweaking something that's already been fully voted and implemented. There's a lot of ideas if we're willing to get some consulting in here and to look at the grid 5 years later, because we've made a lot of progress, and I would hate to go backwards, and that's why I'm saying what I'm saying now. This is one time a year we have the opportunity to get funding for a project. If you're serious, I would highly recommend doing this.
So what would what's the study you're proposing?
We have a committee for $20,000 to do a pay compensation study, not necessarily with as much detail as we had with the last one. The last one did all the job descriptions. This one would be looking at the current system, what we have, and doing a survey of at least some comparable communities that show where are we? Are at the low end, the middle end, the high end? And if that's the case, then how do we adjust for the market, having been 5 years out from our last approach?
So my struggle with that is that's not addressing the problem. And that is addressing a very valid point, but it's not addressing the problem. The problem isn't where are we in our marketplace. The problem is a 3.91 annual when we have, everywhere else people at 2 and 2.5.
Well, the
And-
market study would tell you that if everybody around us is giving 4.1, our 3.9 is on the low end. And that's part of the market.
But still, it's not comparable to, and all that would say is that we have, which we probably do, is that we have a structural problem across the group, Commonwealth.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Not an exclusive problem
No,
here. But
right.
ultimately, this is a problem that isn't a problem here. It's affecting.
It's everywhere.
The issue is, it's unsustainable in a Prop 2.5 environment. It's
Or
like
it-
the school
or-
budgets are unsustainable in a Prop 2.5 environment. Eventually, it's just gonna outrun our capacity, because we don't have any new growth. It's gonna run out our capacity to pay somewhere, and something's gonna give. And
Unless you tune the grid, either the number of steps or the step
No, I'm
size,
saying the existing.
such that,
Right.
yeah.
It's
exactly,
more
yeah, The way
sustainable.
it is now, you have to wait for everybody to top out, and then, hey, you're golden,
No, because it's
until
still
they
2 point.
retire.
What is it then?
It's whatever,
It's
it's
2%
whatever
or
whatever
whatever.
the cost of
2%
living.
below, yeah.
Yeah,
COLA 2.5 is where it's.
Once everyone's topped out, you win, actually,
But that never
Well,
but you have to get there.
Doesn't happen. They top out and they retire.
But then you're bringing people lower. I mean, the problem is, and this might be part of the problem, is that everybody's still moving. At some point, either